Elijah had always been a creature of habit. He woke up early, brewed his coffee, and headed to the small office where he worked as a graphic designer. His days were mostly predictable, with a few moments of excitement when a new project came, and he didn't mind the routine. In fact, he preferred it. It gave him the comfort of knowing what was coming. He lived alone in a cozy apartment on the edge of the city, surrounded by a diverse mix of people from all walks of life. It wasn't a glamorous neighborhood, but it was full of energy, life, and stories. One chilly evening, after a long day at work, Elijah decided to take a walk to clear his head. The streets were lit with the golden glow of street lamps, and the air had that crispness that made you want to wrap yourself in a scarf. As he strolled down the sidewalk, enjoying the stillness of the evening, he was lost in thought. It was one of those rare moments when Elijah could actually think without being interrupted by emails, phone calls, or the hum of office chatter. He was thinking about his life, his work, and how sometimes, despite having everything he needed, something felt a little missing. It was then that he saw her. A woman, about his age, was standing on the corner of the street, looking completely out of place. She seemed lost, glancing around frantically as though she was searching for something. Her hair was disheveled and her clothes were wrinkled as if she'd been traveling for hours. Her face showed a mixture of confusion and distress, and it was clear that she wasn't from around here. Elijah had always been someone who prided himself on being cautious, especially around strangers. But there was something about this woman, something that made him pause. Maybe it was the way she looked like she was about to cry, or perhaps it was the vulnerability in her eyes. Without really thinking, he approached her. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Are you okay?" She turned quickly, almost startled by the sound of his voice. "Oh, yeah, I'm just—" She hesitated, looking down at her phone as though trying to find the right words. "I'm lost. I just moved here and I was supposed to meet someone, but I can't seem to find the address." Elijah, despite not usually getting involved in such situations, felt an urge to help. "Do you want me to walk you to where you're going?" Her eyes lit up in relief. "I'd really appreciate it, actually. I'm kind of new to the area and, well, everything's just a bit overwhelming right now." They started walking together. As they walked, Elijah couldn't help but notice how out of place she looked. She was clearly from somewhere else. There was a certain uncertainty in her posture, like she wasn't quite sure how to fit in. Her clothes, though simple, didn't seem to match the city's vibe. She carried herself like someone who had just been through a lot, though she wasn't saying much. "So, where are you from?" Elijah asked, trying to make small talk and ease the tension. She looked at him briefly before answering. "I'm from a small town. I guess you could say it's the complete opposite of this place. Everything here feels so fast." "I know what you mean," Elijah said, nodding. "I've lived here for a while now, and even I sometimes feel like I'm running to keep up." She smiled, a tired but grateful smile. "I think I'm just getting used to it." They continued walking, and Elijah found himself intrigued by this woman. He didn't know what it was. Maybe it was the fact that she was so open about her discomfort, or maybe it was her honesty. Either way, he wanted to help her more than just showing her the way. It wasn't a feeling he got often, but there was something about her that made him want to offer more. "Listen," Elijah said after a brief pause. "I don't mean to be forward, but if you're new here and need a place to crash for a night, you're welcome to stay at my place. I've got a spare room and it sounds like you could use some rest. I promise it'll be safe." She looked at him with surprise, unsure whether to take his offer seriously. "You don't even know me," she said, almost laughing nervously. "I know," Elijah said, his voice steady. "But you look like you could use a break. I'm just offering a roof for the night, nothing more." For a moment she stood there weighing his words. Elijah could see the doubt in her eyes, but also a spark of relief. It was as though the pressure of trying to figure everything out on her own had suddenly lifted, even if just a little bit. "All right," she said after a long pause. "I'll take you up on that offer. Thank you." Elijah felt a sense of satisfaction. He didn't know why, but he had a gut feeling that this was the right thing to do. So, they walked to his apartment. Elijah feeling a little more curious about this stranger than he cared to admit. They didn't talk much as they made their way through the city streets, but he could tell she was thinking about something important. When they arrived at his apartment building, Elijah opened the door and invited her in. The place was modest, but cozy, nothing fancy, just enough to make someone feel at home. The apartment was neatly kept, though Elijah hadn't made much effort to decorate it. There were a few plants by the window, a couple of pieces of artwork on the walls, and a comfortable couch where he often sat to relax after work. "Make yourself comfortable," Elijah said as he showed her to the spare bedroom. "I'll grab you a towel and some fresh sheets." As she walked into the room, she paused and turned to face him. "I really appreciate this," she said, her voice softer now. "You've already done so much for a stranger." Elijah smiled. "I don't mind. Everyone could use a little kindness now and then." She nodded, and for the first time since they met, gave him a genuine smile. "I'm Mia, by the way." "Mia," Elijah repeated, feeling the name settle in his mind. "Nice to meet you." They exchanged a few more polite words before Elijah left her to rest. As he went back to the living room, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was happening. He didn't know why he felt compelled to help her, but he knew it was the right choice. That night, as he lay in bed, Elijah thought about the way things had unfolded. He wasn't someone who often took risks, especially when it came to strangers, but something about Mia felt different. Maybe it was the vulnerability she wore on her sleeve, or maybe it was the way she seemed lost, but still tried to find her way. Whatever it was, Elijah knew that this simple act of kindness had opened the door to something new, something unexpected. The next morning, the sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a soft glow across the apartment. Elijah had already been awake for a while, sipping his coffee and reading through emails. His mind was still occupied with the events of the night before, Mia. He couldn't quite figure out why he had invited her to stay, but it felt right. The idea of a stranger in his apartment wasn't something he was used to, but there was something about Mia that made him feel at ease. He heard footsteps coming from the hallway, and before long Mia appeared in the kitchen doorway. She was wearing the same clothes she had worn the night before, though she looked more refreshed, her hair slightly tamed and her eyes less tired. The remnants of last night's unease seemed to have faded, replaced with a gentle curiosity. "Morning," Elijah said, offering her a smile. "Good morning," Mia replied, her voice soft but warm. She looked around, clearly a bit unsure of what to do next. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything. I didn't mean to wake you up so early." "You're not interrupting anything," Elijah said, waving his hand in a dismissive manner. "I'm usually up by now." "Coffee?" Mia nodded gratefully, and Elijah poured her a cup. The two of them stood in comfortable silence for a few moments as she took a sip of the coffee. Elijah watched her out of the corner of his eye, noticing the way her shoulders relaxed as if the weight of the previous night was slowly lifting. There was something about her that made him want to know more, but he didn't want to pry. Still, he couldn't help but ask. "So, how are you feeling this morning?" he asked casually, leaning against the counter. Mia took a deep breath, setting the cup down on the table before meeting his gaze. "Better, actually. I think I just needed a good night's sleep, to be honest. Thank you for letting me stay." She looked down at her hands for a moment, almost as if she was gathering her thoughts. "I've been kind of all over the place since I got here. I wasn't expecting it to be so hard to adjust." Elijah nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "It's definitely a big change when you're used to something smaller or quieter. It can feel overwhelming." Mia smiled at his understanding, her eyes softening a bit. "Yeah, exactly. Back home, things were much simpler. You knew everybody and everything felt predictable. But here, it's like you're just another face in the crowd. I guess it's a little lonely too." Elijah didn't respond right away, but he felt something stir inside him. He could relate to that feeling of loneliness. Even though he had friends and a stable job, sometimes it still felt like he was just floating through life, not really connected to anything or anyone. He wondered if Mia felt the same way. "Do you have family here?" Elijah asked, more out of curiosity than anything else. Mia shook her head, her expression falling slightly. No, I've got some distant relatives, but they're all spread out. I don't really have anyone nearby. I came here because I thought I could make a fresh start, you know? But now that I'm here, I'm starting to wonder if I made the right choice. Elijah could see the uncertainty in her eyes. It wasn't the same uncertainty he'd seen the night before, though. This was deeper, more personal. It was the kind of uncertainty that came from taking a big leap and realizing how far you had to fall if things didn't work out. You'll figure it out, Elijah said gently, offering a reassuring smile. Sometimes it just takes time to find your rhythm, especially in a new place. I mean, you came here for a reason, right? Mia met his eyes, and for a brief moment, it felt like the air between them shifted. I hope so, she said quietly. I really do. Elijah's heart softened, and he realized just how much he wanted to help her, not just because she was staying in his apartment, but because he genuinely felt for her. Her struggle was real, and it reminded him of his own journey through life, full of doubts, decisions, and moments of uncertainty. As the morning continued, the conversation between the two of them shifted from one topic to the next. They started to talk more casually, sharing stories about their lives. Mia told Elijah about her small town, about how everything seemed so predictable there, how she could walk into any store and know the person behind the counter. She missed the simplicity of it all, the sense of belonging, of being known. In Naindo, the city, she felt like a tiny speck in a vast ocean, completely anonymous. Elijah shared his own story, revealing how he had grown up in a similar neighborhood, where everyone knew each other and where community was everything. But unlike Mia, he hadn't left for a fresh start. His move to the city had been about pursuing his career, his ambitions. Still, he couldn't deny that there were days when he longed for the closeness and familiarity of his childhood. The city was exciting, but it could also feel isolating, especially when you had no one to come home to. As they exchanged these stories, Elijah began to feel a growing sense of connection to Mia. It wasn't just her struggle that made him want to help, but the way she seemed to carry the same kind of longing he had. She was searching for something more, something that would fill the gap she felt inside, and that was something Elijah could understand deeply. Over the next few days, Mia began to settle into a routine. She spent her days looking for work, and when she wasn't out job hunting, she would spend time exploring the city, learning its nooks and crannies, finding little coffee shops and quiet parks that gave her peace. Elijah would occasionally join her on these walks, and the two would talk about life, about dreams, and about the future. There was something about the way they spoke to each other, an unspoken understanding that grew between them. One evening, after Mia had found a small bookstore job, they decided to grab dinner together. It had become a bit of a tradition now, grabbing a quick bite at a local restaurant after Mia finished her shift. They were sitting in their usual booth enjoying the casual conversation when Elijah realized how comfortable he had become with her. She wasn't just a stranger anymore. She had become someone he looked forward to seeing, someone whose presence brought warmth to his life. Mia, too, seemed to be adjusting. She no longer seemed as lost as she had when she first arrived in the city. The loneliness she had once felt was still there, but it wasn't as heavy as before. Elijah could see the change in her, the way her eyes sparkled a little more and the way her laugh seemed more genuine. I think I'm starting to get the hang of this, Mia said one evening, leaning back in her seat, a satisfied smile on her face. This city is actually kind of fun. Elijah laughed, feeling a sense of pride for her. Told you it would grow on you. I guess so, Mia replied, her eyes twinkling. Maybe it's not so bad after all. Elijah wasn't sure what was happening between them, but he couldn't ignore the feeling that their friendship was growing into something more. They had both started this journey of self-discovery in different ways, but somehow their paths had crossed and they were now sharing moments that neither of them had expected. Over the next few days, their bond deepened. The more time they spent together, the more Elijah found himself thinking about Mia, not just as a friend or someone he had helped, but as someone who might be more important to him than he had realized. And Mia, too, seemed to be becoming more and more comfortable with him. She began to confide in him, telling him things she hadn't shared with anyone else. One afternoon, as they sat together in the park, Mia looked over at Elijah and smiled, softly. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she said, her voice full of sincerity. "You've really helped me more than I can say." Elijah smiled back, but there was something deeper in his gaze. "I'm glad I could be there for you," he said quietly. But in his heart, he knew that helping her had become something more than just a simple act of kindness. It had become a meaningful connection, one that was just beginning to unfold. As the weeks passed, Elijah and Mia's relationship transformed from mere acquaintance to something much deeper. Elijah had never expected this, but somehow, their connection grew stronger with each passing day. It wasn't just about helping Mia anymore, although that was a part of it. It was about something more subtle and undeniable, an unspoken understanding between them, like two people who had found something meaningful in each other. Mia was starting to find her footing in the city. She had settled into her new job at the bookstore, which she enjoyed more than she had expected. The small space was cozy, filled with the smell of coffee and the rustle of pages turning. She liked the peace of it, the way time seemed to slow down in between customers, allowing her to lose herself in a book for a little while. It wasn't the glamorous job she had imagined when she first moved to the city, but it was enough. It gave her the stability she needed while she figured out the next step in her life. At the same time, Elijah noticed that Mia was becoming more comfortable in her own skin. She had stopped talking about her hometown as often, and instead, she started focusing on the present, making plans for the future. The loneliness that had once defined her was still there, but it wasn't as heavy. It was like she had finally started to carve out a space for herself in the city, a space where she could grow and figure out what came next. Despite their growing friendship, Elijah couldn't shake the feeling that there was something between them that was more than just friendship. There were moments when their conversations felt too intimate, when the way Mia looked at him made his heart race a little faster. He'd caught himself on more than one occasion thinking about her in a way that he hadn't intended. It wasn't just her smile or the way she laughed. It was something deeper, a connection that was hard to define. But Elijah wasn't sure if it was something he should act on. He had never been the type to rush into anything, especially not with someone as complicated as Mia. He could sense the walls she had built around herself, walls that she had likely constructed over years of feeling misplaced and disconnected. She had trusted him enough to open up about her struggles, but she still carried a sense of caution in her heart, as though she wasn't fully ready to let anyone in. One evening, after a long day, Mia came over to Elijah's apartment for their usual dinner. They had been spending more time together lately, and it felt natural. The conversations flowed easily, and there was a sense of comfort between them that hadn't been there at the start. Elijah had cooked one of his signature pasta dishes, and they sat at the small kitchen table enjoying the meal and each other's company. "You know," Mia said as she twirled a forkful of pasta, "I never thought I'd be able to say this, but I think I'm starting to like it here." Elijah looked up, surprised. "Really? You're feeling more at home?" Mia smiled, her eyes reflecting a mix of relief and excitement. "Yeah. It's still a little scary sometimes, but I'm starting to get the hang of it, and I feel like I'm actually becoming part of something, like I'm not just passing through anymore." Elijah felt a warmth in his chest as he listened to her words. There was something beautiful about the way she had started to embrace her new life, to make it her own. He could see the change in her, the way she walked a little taller, the way she spoke more confidently, the way she laughed more freely. Mia was no longer the lost, uncertain woman he had met weeks ago. She had begun to find herself. "I'm really glad to hear that," Elijah said, his voice sincere. "I think you're starting to see that you belong here too." Mia's eyes softened as she looked at him. "I don't think I could have gotten this far without you," she said quietly. "You've been so patient with me, and I really appreciate that." I don't know if I would have made it through those first few weeks without you. Elijah smiled, feeling a mix of gratitude and humility. He hadn't expected anything in return for helping her, but hearing her say that meant a lot. You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad I could be there for you. It's been nice getting to know you. There was a pause between them, a moment of shared understanding. For a second it felt like the air around them thickened, like something was hanging in the balance. Elijah could feel his heart racing, and he wondered if Mia felt it too. There was a tension now, a quiet electricity that had been building ever since they first met. They weren't just two people thrown together by circumstance anymore. There was something deeper, something unspoken, that had started to take root between them. Mia looked away first, as though she was trying to shake the feeling that had suddenly settled in the room. She cleared her throat and reached for her glass of water. Anyway, I'm just glad I've got you around, she said, her voice a little lighter, though Elijah could sense a hint of something more in her words. I'm glad too, Elijah said softly, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than he had intended. He wasn't sure what was happening between them, but he knew that whatever it was undeniable. They had both changed since they first met, and somehow in the process of helping Mia find her place, Elijah had found something for himself as well. A sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, and maybe, just maybe, something more than that. As the evening wore on, the two of them continued to talk, but the lightheartedness of their usual banter was tinged with something different. They were no longer just two people passing time together. There was a growing sense of closeness, a bond that had begun to take shape in the spaces between their words, in the glances they shared, in the moments of silence that felt comfortable rather than awkward. After dinner, they settled on the couch to watch a movie, though neither of them paid much attention to it. Instead, they talked about everything and nothing at all, about the future, about the city, about their dreams, and about the small moments that made life worth living. Elijah found himself laughing more than he had in a while, and Mia's laughter was like music to his ears. It was easy to forget about the outside world when they were together. In those moments, it felt like everything else faded away, and there was just the two of them. Later, as the evening came to a close and Mia prepared to leave, she turned to Elijah with a smile that felt different than any other smile she had given him before. It was softer, more intimate, as though she was seeing him in a way she hadn't allowed herself to before. Thanks for tonight, she said, her voice quiet but warm. Anytime, Elijah replied, his heart skipping a beat. Take care, Mia. As she walked out the door, Elijah stood there for a moment, staring at the space where she had just been. Something had shifted between them, something he couldn't quite put into words. But he knew one thing for sure. Things between them were changing, and he wasn't sure where it was going. But for the first time, he felt excited about what might come next. The days following their quiet, meaningful evening together felt different. Elijah couldn't pinpoint exactly what had changed, but there was a noticeable shift in the air between him and Mia. It wasn't a dramatic change, but it was there. Their conversations had deepened. The usual light-hearted exchanges were now mixed with moments of vulnerability, where they both allowed themselves to talk more openly about their fears and dreams. It was as though the walls they had built around themselves were slowly crumbling piece by piece. Mia had become more open in the way she spoke, and Elijah noticed it immediately. She no longer seemed so guarded, and when she talked about her past, it wasn't with the same distance or caution she had once used. It was as though she had begun to trust him in a way she hadn't with anyone else before. Elijah, for his part, had started to feel a deeper connection to her. He wanted to help her more, but it wasn't just out of kindness anymore. It was because he genuinely cared about her, about what happened to her next, and about the possibility of something more between them. One afternoon, a few weeks after their dinner conversation, Elijah found himself sitting in his favorite cafe, sipping on his usual cappuccino. He had just finished up a few projects and was trying to unwind, though his mind kept drifting to Mia. He hadn't seen her in a few days. She had been busy with work, and he had been caught up in his own schedule. Despite their growing connection, They had both been focused on their individual lives, but there was a part of Elijah that missed her presence more than he expected. She had become a regular part of his day-to-day life, and now that she was absent, something felt incomplete. Just as Elijah was about to finish his coffee, he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned around to see Mia standing there, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Hey," she said, her voice a little higher than usual. "Do you have a minute?" "Of course," Elijah replied, his heart giving a small leap at the sight of her. "What's going on?" Mia hesitated for a moment, biting her lip as she considered whether or not to say something. "I need to talk to you," she said finally, her tone serious. Elijah's curiosity piqued, and he gestured to the seat across from him. "Come sit down. What's on your mind?" Mia slid into the seat, her hands folded nervously in her lap. Elijah could see the change in her posture. She wasn't the same confident woman she had been just days ago. There was something weighing on her now, and he could tell it was important. "I've been thinking a lot," Mia began, her voice quiet, "and I think I've been avoiding something." She paused, her gaze falling to the table. "I've been so focused on making it here in the city, on building my life, that I've sort of ignored how I'm feeling." Elijah leaned forward, his attention fully on her. He had always known there was more to Mia than the bright, confident smile she put on. There were layers to her, and she was finally allowing herself to peel them back. "What do you mean?" he asked, gently. Mia exhaled slowly, then looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of uncertainty and vulnerability. I think I've been scared," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Scared of letting people get too close, scared of depending on someone else. I've been doing everything on my own for so long, and now that I've started to build something here, I'm afraid of losing it." Elijah's heart tightened at her words. He could hear the fear in her voice, the hesitation. He knew that Mia had been carrying these fears with her, and it was clear that she had been struggling with them alone. He didn't know everything about her past, but he had learned enough to know that she had been through things that made her cautious and guarded. "You don't have to do everything alone, Mia," Elijah said softly. "It's okay to let people in. It's okay to trust that there's a place for you here." Mia looked up at him, and for a moment their eyes locked in a way that felt deeply personal. There was something in her gaze, something that spoke of unspoken feelings, of things they hadn't said to each other yet. It was as though the world around them had faded away, and all that mattered in that moment was the space between them. "I don't know how to do that," Mia whispered. "I don't know how to let someone in without pushing them away." Elijah didn't speak right away. He could see the conflict inside her, the battle between wanting to trust and the fear that trusting would lead to disappointment. He knew the feeling. He had been there before, guarding his own heart because he was scared of getting hurt. "You don't have to figure it all out right now," Elijah said finally, his voice steady. "We'll take it one step at a time. I'm here and I'm not going anywhere." Mia's eyes filled with something he couldn't quite place. Gratitude, maybe, or a mixture of hope and fear. She gave a small tentative smile as if his words had made a crack in the wall she had built around herself. It wasn't a big smile, but it was enough to show that she was starting to let go of some of the fear she had been holding on to. "I'm glad you're here," she said quietly. "I really am." Elijah smiled back, his heart swelling at her words. "I'm glad you're here too, Mia, and whatever you're afraid of, we'll face it together. You don't have to carry it alone." Mia looked down at her hands, and for a moment Elijah thought she might withdraw again, but instead she took a deep breath and looked back up at him. There was something different in her eyes now, a lightness, a willingness to embrace what was coming even if it scared her. Maybe I've been too afraid of what might happen if I let myself get close to someone," she said softly. "But I think I'm starting to realize that the risk is worth it. It's worth it if it means I don't have to be alone." Elijah's heart skipped a beat, and for the first time in a long while, He allowed himself to hope, really hope, that this was the beginning of something more. He hadn't expected to feel this way about Mia when they first met. He hadn't expected to become so invested in her life, so concerned about her well-being. But now, in this moment, he realized how deeply he cared for her, how much he wanted to be there for her, and how much he hoped that they could face whatever came next together. "You're not alone, Mia," Elijah said quietly. "Not anymore. We're in this together." Mia's expression softened, and she gave him a small, almost shy smile. There was a warmth in her eyes, a sense of peace that hadn't been there before. She didn't say anything in response, but the way she looked at him spoke volumes. As they sat there together, the world outside the cafe continued on, unaware of the small, quiet shift that had just taken place between two people who had started as strangers. But in that moment, Elijah and Mia knew that something had changed between them, something real and lasting. And while neither of them knew exactly where it would lead, they both felt a sense of relief, because for the first time in a long time, they knew they weren't alone anymore. The days that followed that conversation were filled with a sense of quiet anticipation, but also a new kind of understanding between Elijah and Mia. There was no sudden, dramatic shift, but there was a feeling of something deepening between them, a quiet reassurance that they were on the same path, moving forward together, even if they didn't fully understand what the future would hold. Mia had started to open up more, allowing herself to share the pieces of her past she had once kept hidden. She still carried some of the weight of her old life with her, those old fears and insecurities. But there was a softness in her now, a willingness to be seen for who she truly was. Elijah, for his part, found himself more and more drawn to her. There was something about the way she allowed herself to be vulnerable with him, something about the way she trusted him, that made his heart ache in a way that felt both painful and beautiful. They had begun to spend even more time together, no longer just as a way to pass the time, but as something they both genuinely looked forward to. They went on long walks through the city, exploring hidden parts of town they hadn't noticed before. Sometimes they would sit in quiet parks, sipping coffee and watching the world go by, talking about everything and nothing at all. They laughed, shared stories, and began to truly enjoy each other's company in a way that was easy and natural. One evening, after a particularly long day, they found themselves sitting together in Elijah's apartment. The rain was tapping gently against the window, creating a cozy atmosphere in the otherwise quiet space. Mia was sitting on the couch, her legs curled up beneath her, a book resting in her lap. Elijah was at the kitchen counter, chopping vegetables for dinner. He glanced over at her, taking in the peaceful way she seemed to be settled in. It was the kind of calm Elijah had never really known before. No rush, no expectation, just the present moment. He had become so used to having her around, her presence almost a comforting constant. It was hard to remember what his life had been like before. He had never been one to seek out company, preferring the quiet of his own space, but Mia had a way of making things feel different. She made him feel less alone, less like he was just drifting through life. And though he was still unsure about what all of this meant, he knew that he didn't want it to end. Mia looked up from her book and caught him staring at her. Her lips curled into a soft smile. "What?" she asked, her voice warm and inviting. Elijah chuckled and shook his head. "I was just thinking about how much things have changed. I never expected any of this when we first met." Mia's smile deepened and she shifted on the couch to face him. "I know what you mean. I didn't expect to feel so comfortable here, or with you. I don't know what it is, but I feel like I can just breathe when I'm around you, like I don't have to try so hard." Elijah's heart skipped a beat at her words. He felt the same way, though he had never quite put it into words. It was as if they had both found something in each other that made life a little easier, a little more bearable. "Yeah," Elijah said softly, placing the knife down and walking over to sit beside her. "It's like we don't have to be anyone other than who we are. Just ourselves." There was a long pause, and in that moment, Elijah felt a stirring in his chest, something that he couldn't quite ignore. He glanced over at Mia, her face illuminated by the soft light from the lamp beside them. She looked beautiful, in a way that was simple but powerful. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, not even herself. She was just Mia, and somehow that made her all the more remarkable. "Do you ever think about the future?" Elijah asked, his voice quieter now, as if testing the waters. Mia turned to look at him, her eyes thoughtful. "All the time," she said, her voice steady. "I mean, I've always been so focused on getting by, on surviving. But now, I don't know. I think about what comes next, about whether I'm really building something I want, or if I'm just going through the motions." Elijah nodded, his mind racing. He had asked the question more for his own sake than hers. He had been thinking about the future a lot lately, about where he was headed and whether his path might align with hers. He had grown so attached to her presence, to the way she made everything feel a little less lonely, a little more real. He couldn't imagine his life without her in it, but he also didn't want to rush anything. "I think it's okay to be unsure about the future," Elijah said finally. "I don't have everything figured out either, but maybe it's enough that we're here right now doing this." Mia looked at him with a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. She shifted closer to him, her knee gently brushing against his. "I've spent so much of my life running from things," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid of getting too close to people, afraid of trusting anyone. But with you, I don't feel that fear as much. I feel like I can just be." Elijah's heart pounded in his chest. There it was again, the quiet connection, the unspoken bond that had grown between them over time. It was as though they had both found a place of safety with each other, a space where they didn't have to hide who they really were. And yet, even as they spoke about it, Elijah knew that there was still so much left unsaid, so many questions about the future that neither of them had fully answered. "Mia," Elijah said, his voice low and sincere, "I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I don't want to face it without you in it." Mia's eyes softened, and for a moment she didn't say anything. She just looked at him, as if searching his face for the truth in his words. Finally, she smiled, a smile that felt genuine and free. "I don't want to face it without you either," she said softly. "Maybe we can just take it one day at a time." Elijah reached out, gently taking her hand in his. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Whatever came next, he knew they would face it together. Over the next few weeks, their relationship continued to evolve. They took their time, not rushing into anything but allowing themselves to grow and learn about each other. Elijah still had his doubts about the future, but he didn't let them overshadow the present. And in the present, everything felt right. They found joy in the small moments, walking through the park, sharing stories over dinner, and simply being in each other's company. As the days turned into weeks and then into months, Elijah and Mia's bond became something stronger, something more enduring than either of them could have imagined when they first met. They had both been running from something, Mia from her past and Elijah from his own fear of vulnerability. But together, they found the courage to face whatever came next. And though they didn't know where the future would take them, they knew that as long as they had each other, they were ready to face it, side by side.